Hey, it's the Chief Bonding with Board Games and RPGs, and today we're going to talk about the top 5 aspects of change in tabletop role-playing games from the 1980s to the 2020s. Strap in. Here we go. That's a little odd. So first, as we get started, don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to get these into your feed. Enough on that, you know what to do, but it really helps out a lot. So, first, the caveat. In the 80s, so I was born in 1970, so we're talking age 10 to 19 was when I did my first role-playing. And then there was a long time where I was doing war games, so Avalon Hill, things of that nature, and then into the Euro board game scene, designer games, and then back into RPGs starting in the late 20-teens. So now I'm in deep with role-playing, and it struck me how different things were. So number 5, theme. When I was a kid, I wasn't as much into the fantasy aspects, the fantasy books, the fantasy movies. I didn't even read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit until much later in life. It just wasn't quite my thing. Being a kid of the 80s, I was deep into apocalyptic stuff. It felt like the balloon was going to go up at any point in time, and we were going to be red dawning it. That's what it felt like. And I was not so much into the fantasy take. So I tried D&D. There was a kid from my church that would DM it, and I had a very good time with the aspect and inhabiting the character. I like that. But it just wasn't quite gelling with me theme-wise. And then Twilight 2000 came out, first edition, and that was what I was looking for. Compared to the 80s to what we have today, there is sci-fi. Now, there was some then, but I wasn't as much into sci-fi as much, again, as the apocalyptic. There's all kinds of apocalyptic. I won't go into them here. That'll be a whole nother video. Cyberpunk. There's the storytelling stuff. There's things like Fiasco, horror, Cthulhu type stuff, which is even detective or mystery role-playing games, mechs, heist games, 80s nostalgia, kids on bikes, adventure gaming, the West Marches, the exploration, which I tend to love the adventure in the West Marches now. That's really been my sweet spot. So there is just so much more coming out, being on the other end of the kind of early beginnings to all these different branches to the tree. Number 4, how you played. So in the 80s, it was always us sitting around the table. Now, I was a big board gamer at that time as well, and there were things being done through snail mail. You could board game through snail mail, and I've read stuff where you could even have some semblance of role-playing, but it was out there. I subscribed to a magazine called The General, and people could link up and they could do moves with a base game that was all done by mail. And maybe that was fun. That was not going to work for me as a kid. Most, if not all, for me, all role-playing was done at the tabletop. And you could see those folks that you were playing with and the decisions that were being made. And I liked when the DM or referee or GM was rolling the dice where we could see them. That's something I still like today. I like to see the die as they're popping along, and are we going to get the result? Even if it's not my role, there's that aspect of shared, come on, that will be so cool, or, ooh, terrible miss, or, oh, critical hit. And that physical nature and the tactile, the touching and the hearing, just that aspect of being gathered together. That physical nature and the collaborative storytelling from the 80s versus now. Hello, so there's still that, and that's still my preferred way to play. but you've got all the digital aspects of tabletop role-playing games. You've got Roll20, Foundry, which I have, but just so I don't leave some out that I don't use, Fantasy Grounds, Owlbear Rodeo, Tabletop Simulator, Above VTT, and Astral. So on top of you having these virtual play spaces that you can gather in, still having the tabletop, I've used this mode to not do it live, although I could do it live even, but when I ran some Twilight 2004E with Ron Nicholson and Dan Pancaldi. Dan's in Canada, and Ron, I can't remember if he was in Ohio at that point or if he was still in Colorado Springs, but we could link in and play, and it played great. I still prefer being in person, but playing virtually as I recorded it using StreamYard worked wonderfully. But there's so many different ways that you can play that way, not to mention when I was a kid playing in the 80s, you had some Atari games coming out that were trying to kind of get you to that level, but now you have the whole video game element that drops you into the role-playing system, whether it's some massive online where everybody's coming in, or you're running it through solo as you're doing whatever. I've got a buddy of mine that tells me he has tons of hunting and fishing games, but none of them worked as well as Red Dead Redemption 2 or original, I don't remember. But I was like, you're kidding me. He goes, no, he's a big fisherman, he's a big fisher and a hunter. But he said he would buy all these games just designed toward hunting or fishing, and nothing came close to what Red Dead Redemption was doing. And so I was like, you're going on and not doing the shooting part or even the setups and the play. He said, well, I did all that, but the fishing and hunting is spectacular. So the idea of that dropping into the role of even a fisherman or a hunter in those virtual spaces is just crazy. Now, again, this is one of my players that will come over to my house and sit down at the table. So he's dipping into that computer game element, but he still loves to come in and join a group and have kind of that story come to life within us, which is, well, I still think sitting around at the actual table is, well, I know it's my preferred way to play. Number 3, marketing. The marketing used to be, I think we could limit it down to 3 things. You had your game stores, you had your magazines, and basically word of mouth. That was it. Now, you move into the 2020s, and it is a cornucopia. You got the whole web. So not only do you still have your circle of friends, you still have the game stores, and in my perception, way better than the one experienced with back in Denver. But you've got, you can go look at Drive-Thru RPG. You can go pick up free games to print and try and see, do you like this? And then, you know what? I love this. Oh, there's a hardback. I'm going to buy that. Or something, it comes out in a zine format. Knave. Ben Milton lives here in Wichita. I don't know the man, but he lives here, and I love his Maze Rats. Well, I picked those both up just because I was getting into OSR and stream down and cut down versions. And, then those get so popular in that self-printing mode that all of a sudden things start to get kickstarted and they're making lots and lots of money. And then that opens that up to a whole nother group of people. So there's this online everywhere thing. You can watch Critical Role, so they're playing it, or what Trevor Duvall does. That's what even opened me up to how solo play works. He's Trevor's a voice actor with Me, Myself, and Die, and as he brought in these other systems, yet again, I was like, what is that system? Wow. And so you're just getting all these different systems and play modes and styles and old school Renaissance and Kriegspiel stuff coming through, and then the additions of this and the riffs off of that and the hacks of this, and it's just like, oh my gosh, are we in good times. So number 2 is style. So I'm going to drop back to the 80s first because, again, everything seemed narrow. It was kind of what you'll still see a little bit now, although it's changing, that everybody just said D&D. So it was advanced D&D, and then all I would hear was, oh, it's 3rd edition or 3.5, or, no, now it's 5e. 80s felt like it was just D&D, and then there were these occasional, I would hear of Traveler, and I was like, I don't know about spaceships. And then it was Twilight 2000. Oh, there's an apocalyptic game. And then there were some board games that kind of dabbled in a little bit. Even Twilight 2000 did that with a little boxed version that was supposed to bridge you over. I know there was some general storytelling, and that was all kind of in there, but it really seems stuck in the 80s into crunchy, rules-based when I got into it. So what's the rule for that? What's the math? What have I hit? What is this bonus? And that's when I slipped away from role-playing. So coming back with the styles that are out there now, as I first picked up Fate, I've picked up Fate Core and learned, this is the stripped down version. And even if I'm failing, maybe I'm failing with consequences. I love that. It's all about the story, or, hey, that roll was fantastic. Why don't you tell me what that means to you and your character? And then hearing that come out, that storytelling aspect, I was like, well, this is cool. This is a lot more open. I've got a group that comes over now that plays time traveling. We're the preservers of time. And somebody actually saved Lincoln. Well, our job as the team, I'm running this as the referee, but their job is to come in and put history back right. So they may even have to kill Lincoln. So in this system, in this style, we can do anything with the fate. But then you've got what Free League is doing. All the styles of games that are coming out with, sometimes it's like a dice chucker with a bunch of 6-sided dice, and you're just dice, and you're trying to get 6s. Or they morph that into all the different sided dice. So as your skill level goes up, you can pick up, instead of a 6, you got an 8, or maybe you got a 10, or a 12, or you got a full 20-sided die. So all of these styles are starting to kind of percolate out more and more. You even have what Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast did with their OGL, their open gaming license, where all these companies, Critical Role and Pathfinder, and they're all profiting off of that OGL, that open gaming license. And Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast starts to try to ratchet that down, and the community as a whole comes out and says, no, no, no. And they're in this huge growth portion of styles that are coming out and organically moving, and what systems you can plug in, what style of play do you want to do. There's just so many different things happening that you can just see this growth, and because of that, it's even getting, in my opinion, although still nerdy, cooler. Which of course dovetails into my number one, which is cool factor. So I've touched on this twice now. In the 80s, it was not cool. It was not cool at all. And the idea that I could drop into a world and fictionally play in this world, and other people would be there doing their thing, and we could conjoin that together, was cool to me. But there was no doubt that it wasn't generally cool. Definitely still something that was kind of like, yeah, I like to play a lot of games. And then it'd be like, what kind of games do you play? Well, I play a lot of war games. And you could kind of work down the line of, well, Risk. Oh yeah, Risk. And then you would start, well, I also have, I have this B-17 World War II game that I play. And then I have this other squad-based game that I'm playing with World War II soldiers. And then I've done some Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes along the way, some of your friends would drop away. Oh, I don't do that. Oh, okay. And then you would just kind of talk about something else. Nowadays is a great time. First of all, I think it's been made cool. You've got Critical Role making millions of dollars and even putting out on Amazon Prime their show. And I think in general, people are looking for great storytelling things to watch and enjoy, so they can watch the YouTube and get hours and hours, hundreds of hours of content that way, and see people playing it. Now, the way they play it, they're all voice actors and top of the line in what they do, and the GM. So sometimes I think that sets the bar high, and they don't know all the production value that's going on and all of that comes with it. But it still captures the magic that can happen at your table. But it's made it extremely mainstream. Well, maybe not extremely mainstream, but it's made it mainstream. If you say role-playing game, people generally know what that is. The idea of Trevor Duvall and Me, Myself, and I doing the solo play and showing, even the solo war games I used to play, people would be like, oh, that's so sad. You just played by yourself. I'm like, no, it was awesome. I was running B-17 missions with a crew of 10. It was role player light in a war game format. But I remember my parents even coming down saying, hey, it's a Saturday. It's beautiful outside. You're up in the mountains of Colorado. You've been in your room all day. I'm like, no. I've been flying a mission, deep into Germany. And they'd be like, okay. And, so even the folks were kind of like, what? And have you seen the manual he read? He's reading. That's good. Whereas now I'm able to sit down and my son will play. Sometimes he's had some friends over, but he's also able to join in with my friends as an equal. And he's probably one of the best ROLE players sitting at the table. He really inhabits the individual and have that shared space. And there's nothing bad about that at all. I mean, if someone came up and said, oh, you've been a police officer and you're a sergeant on the police department for 27 years, how could you play these games? I'm like, how could I not? You know how much joy is there in the time spent with friends and the time spent with my son and seeing his imagination just go places. It's amazing. And then sometimes I have people go, really? Huh. I might have to try that with my kid. Yeah. Why would you miss out on that? Interesting. So, the cool factor. And I think it's going to get cooler as time goes by. People are hungering for that together time. So while you have the video games, that's another part of it that it's caught on. The role-playing in the video games has made it cool, and top-of-the-line games putting visuals out that are crazy. The coming together is something that people, I think, are hungering for, especially now. And when it works, sometimes it can be painful when it doesn't work. But when the role-playing and the story group-telling just takes off, it's an amazing, cool experience. And if you haven't experienced it, keep playing or try role-playing games. If you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's why it's my number one. It is beyond a cool factor. It's this wonderful, joyous, collaborative game storytelling adventure that's going on, and it is awesome. And if you run into that, it's kind of like when Star Wars clicked for me. It was the first movie that I got lost in. Or My Brother Sam Is Dead in 6th grade was a book I read that I dropped into the book, and I was like, are you kidding me? It was like I was in a deeper movie. And I was like, where do I find more of these? Libraries and bookstores. And then what role-playing gives you as other individuals are able to take part in that and something new is created from it. Ooh, cool factor. All right, guys, that is it. That's my list. A little bit long, but hopefully you enjoyed it. See you guys. Bye.